The Sterling Hotel's private dining room overlooked Lake Michigan, all crystal chandeliers and mahogany panels designed to impress. Through the frosted glass doors, I could see my family gathering for what they'd called the Annual Strategic Investment Review. A pretentious name for a meeting where the Prescott family discussed their various business ventures and congratulated themselves on their financial acumen. I'd received the invitation 3 weeks ago, the same generic email sent to all family members. Join us to review the family portfolio and discuss opportunities for the coming year. I'd RSVP'd yes, taken the day off from my consulting work, and driven 2 hours from Indianapolis to Chicago for this. Now my father, Richard Prescott, stood in the doorway wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, his hand raised like a traffic cop. "Sarah," he said, using the tone he reserved for explaining things to people he considered intellectually inferior, "I don't think you understand what this meeting is about." "The family portfolio," I said calmly. "Investment strategies. Annual review." "Yes, but this is for family members who've actually contributed something to discuss." He adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous habit that betrayed his discomfort. "You don't have any investments to review." Behind him, I could see my brother Christopher setting up a presentation, his wife Amanda arranging folders at each seat. My sister Victoria was showing my mother something on her tablet, both of them laughing at whatever they were looking at. My Uncle Thomas and Aunt Helen occupied 2 chairs at the head of the table, the family elders presiding over their successful descendants. "I have investments," I said quietly. "Sarah." My mother appeared beside Dad, her Cartier jewelry catching the light. Patricia Prescott had perfected the art of delivering devastating critiques with a sympathetic smile. "We all know about your little consulting business. That's very nice, dear. But this meeting is about substantial holdings. Real investments. Your father has his medical device companies, Christopher has the pharmaceutical ventures, Victoria has her biotech startups. This isn't the venue for discussing a small consulting practice." "I'm not here to discuss my consulting work," I said. "Then what exactly would you contribute to this meeting?" Dad asked. "You live in a rental apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Subaru. You work contracts for mid-sized companies doing what? Efficiency reviews? Process optimization." He said these terms like they were quaint hobbies. "That's not the same as building enterprises worth tens of millions of dollars." Through the glass, Christopher was testing his presentation clicker. He'd always loved presentations, loved the performance aspect of business. He caught sight of me in the doorway and frowned, saying something to Amanda that made her look over. "The invitation said this was for all family members," I pointed out. "It is," Mom said gently. "For family members who've achieved a certain level of success, who have something meaningful to contribute to the discussion. Sarah, you're 34 years old. You have no significant assets, no major investments, no business holdings. You're still living like you're fresh out of college." "I live simply because I choose to," I said. "You live simply because you have to," Dad corrected. "There's a difference between minimalism and inability. We're not trying to be hurtful, Sarah. We're being practical. This meeting involves discussions of multi-million-dollar investments, market strategies, portfolio diversification. It requires a certain level of expertise and experience that you simply don't have." Christopher had come to the door now, joining our parents. At 37, he'd cultivated the look of a successful healthcare executive. Designer glasses, perfectly tailored suit, expensive watch. "Hey Sarah, maybe this isn't the best use of your time? We're going to be talking about things like FDA approval timelines, clinical trial results, venture capital rounds. Pretty dry stuff if you're not in the industry." "I understand those topics," I said. "Understanding them and actively working in them are different things," Christopher said, his tone patient in a way that made my jaw clench. "You consult for what, manufacturing companies? Logistics firms? That's not the same as being on the cutting edge of medical innovation." Victoria joined the cluster at the door. At 32, my younger sister had always been the family favorite, the golden child who'd done everything right. Stanford MBA, multiple successful biotech startups, married to another Stanford MBA. "Sarah, I think what everyone's trying to say is that this meeting is going to be really inside baseball for the medical and pharmaceutical industries. You'd probably be bored. Why don't we grab coffee later instead? Just as sisters." "I want to attend the meeting," I said simply. Dad's patience evaporated. Sarah, this is for successful family members. People who've built something. People who have real stakes in real companies. You're a consultant. That's fine, that's respectable, but it's not the same thing. This isn't your world. Not failures, Mom added, her smile somehow making the words even more cutting. We're not saying you're a failure, dear. You're just on a different path. A smaller path. There's no shame in that. I have investments to discuss, I said again, keeping my voice level despite the anger building in my chest. What investments? Christopher asked, and I could hear the condescension. Do you own stock in the consulting firm you work for? That's not really what this meeting is about, Sarah. I don't work for a consulting firm, I said. I own one. But that's not what I'm here to discuss. You own a consulting firm? Victoria's eyebrows rose. Since when? 6 years ago. A one-person consulting firm isn't really, Christopher started. 32 employees across 4 states, I interrupted. But like I said, that's not what I'm here to discuss. The family cluster at the door exchanged glances. This was clearly news to them, which shouldn't have been surprising. They'd never asked about my work beyond dismissive assumptions. That's wonderful, dear, Mom said in the tone she used for participation trophies. But this meeting is about medical and pharmaceutical investments specifically. Unless your consulting firm works in that space. It does, I said. Among others. But I'm here to discuss my investment portfolio, not my consulting business. Dad's expression hardened. Sarah, what investment portfolio? You can't seriously expect us to believe you have holdings comparable to. I'm not expecting you to believe anything, I said quietly. I'm telling you I was invited to this meeting. I have investments to discuss and I'd like to participate. This is ridiculous, Dad said, his voice rising. Thomas, Helen, can you please explain to Sarah that this meeting has prerequisites? That you can't just walk in claiming to have investments without any evidence of capability or success. Uncle Thomas appeared in the doorway. At 68, he was the family patriarch, the one who'd built the initial Prescott fortune through medical device patents. Sarah, your father makes a valid point. This meeting involves very substantial sums and very complex strategies. We're talking about portfolio values in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not sure what you think you have to contribute to that discussion. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it. I'd like to participate, I said once more. No, Dad said flatly. Sarah, I'm sorry, but no. This meeting is for serious investors only. You're welcome to join us for lunch afterward, but the actual portfolio discussion is not appropriate for someone at your level. High level, I repeated. You know what I mean, Dad said, frustration bleeding through. You're not in the same financial league. You rent an apartment for probably $1,200 a month. You drive a car that's nearly ready for the junkyard. You work as a consultant for companies we've never heard of. That's fine, that's your choice. But don't pretend you belong in a room where we're discussing 8-figure investments. My phone vibrated again. Then again. Someone was persistent. I'm going to ask one more time, I said. May I attend this meeting? No, Mom said, her smile gone now. Sarah, you're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing us. Please just accept that this isn't for you and leave gracefully. Fine, I said. I turned and walked away from the frosted glass doors, from the mahogany panels, from my family's certainty about who I was and what I was capable of. Behind me, I heard Dad say something to Christopher about delusions, and Mom adding something about always been sensitive. The hotel hallway was empty, decorated with abstract art that cost more than it was worth. I pulled out my phone. 7 missed calls from James Whitmore, my attorney. 3 from Diana Chin, my investment manager. 2 from Margaret Kowalski, my CFO. I called James first. Sarah, he answered immediately. I've been trying to reach you. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Your family's investment meeting. They don't know your Archway Capital, do they? No, I said. We need to tell them. No. Before they say something or make a decision that can't be walked back. What happened? Richard Prescott just sent out an email announcing a major restructuring of Prescott Medical Devices. He's planning to take on significant debt to fund expansion, using the company's existing revenue as collateral. He's presenting this to the family meeting right now as a done deal. I closed my eyes. How much debt? $180 million. The problem is, Archway Capital holds their existing debt, $220 million worth. Under the terms of that debt agreement, taking on additional senior debt without noteholder approval constitutes a default event, which would trigger immediate repayment requirements. I finished. Exactly. If Richard announces this restructuring and you're forced to call the debt, Prescott Medical Devices goes into bankruptcy. Your family loses everything. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Diana Chin. James, hold on. I switched lines. Diana. Please tell me you're stopping this, Diana said without preamble. Christopher Prescott just sent out a press release announcing a merger between his pharmaceutical company and a European competitor. The merger involves liquidating his preferred shares to fund the deal, preferred shares that Archway Capital owns 70% of. He can't liquidate without majority shareholder approval, I said. I know that. You know that. Christopher apparently doesn't know that. Or he doesn't know Archway Capital is you. Either way, if this goes public, the merger falls apart, his company loses credibility, and all shareholders lose money. Including you. How much money? Your position would lose approximately $90 million in value, maybe more. My third line showed Margaret calling. Diana, I need to call you back. I switched lines. Margaret. Victoria Prescott Strand is presenting a biotech investment opportunity to the family meeting, Margaret said, her accountant's voice crisp with concern. She's asking family members to invest $50 million in a clinical trial for a gene therapy treatment. She's describing it as low risk, high reward. And it's not. The trial has a 12% chance of success according to industry standards. It's high risk, potential high reward. But here's the problem. She's positioning this as a family-only opportunity, excluding outside investors. Under SEC regulations, if Archway Capital has information about this investment, which we do because we're a major investor in 3 competing gene therapy companies, and we don't disclose that information when other family members are making investment decisions, we're potentially liable for securities fraud. You're telling me I need to tell them who I am, I said. I'm telling you that this entire meeting is a legal and financial minefield, and the only way out is full disclosure. Immediately, through the walls, I could hear the murmur of voices from the private dining room. My family, making decisions about investments I'd been funding for years without their knowledge. My family, who just turned me away from their meeting because I wasn't successful enough to participate. What's the total exposure if I let this all play out? I asked Margaret. Best case, $200 million in losses across your various holdings. Worst case, $340 million in potential legal liability. Plus your entire family loses everything in the bankruptcies and lawsuits that follow. And if I disclose? Then you control the narrative. You stop the worst decisions before they happen. You protect your investments and theirs. But you also have to tell your family that their disappointing failure of a daughter has been their primary investor for the past 8 years. I laughed, the sound harsh in the empty hallway. When you put it that way. Sarah, I know this is personal, but... It's not personal, I interrupted. It's business. Get James and Diana on a conference line. We're going to crash their meeting. I'll arrange it. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I ended the call and stared at the abstract art on the wall. A Jackson Pollock reproduction, probably, all chaos and color. Appropriate for the moment. My phone rang again. James with Diana and Margaret on the line. Options. I said. We can send a formal letter from Archway Capital to all parties, disclosing your position and the conflicts, James said. That covers us legally but doesn't stop any decisions in progress. We can request an emergency injunction to halt the meeting, Diana offered. But that requires explaining to a judge why the owner of Archway Capital needs to stop her own family's investment meeting. It'll leak to the press within hours. Or you walk in there and tell them yourself, Margaret said. Right now. Before Richard signs the debt agreement, before Christopher issues the press release, before Victoria commits family funds to a bad investment. Through the wall I heard applause. Someone had finished a presentation. How long before Richard's debt announcement? I asked. He's scheduled to present in 15 minutes, James said. Christopher's press release goes out in 30. Victoria's investment pitch is scheduled for 45 minutes from now. So we have 15 minutes before the first domino falls. Yes. I walked back toward the private dining room. Through the frosted glass, I could see Christopher taking a bow, basking in applause for whatever he'd just presented. Victoria was next at the podium, pulling up her presentation. My father saw me first when I opened the door. His expression moved from surprise to irritation. "Sarah, I thought we were clear." "I need to speak," I said, walking into the room. "Now, before Richard presents his restructuring plan." "How do you know about?" Dad started, then shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Sarah, this is a closed meeting. You need to leave." "I'm a major investor in Prescott Medical Devices," I said clearly. "I have a right to be here." The room went silent. Christopher had frozen mid-bow. Victoria stood at the podium with her mouth slightly open. Mom looked confused. Uncle Thomas frowned deeply. "What are you talking about?" Dad demanded. "Archway Capital holds $220 million in debt obligations from Prescott Medical Devices," I said. "The debt agreement includes covenants that restrict taking on additional senior debt without noteholder approval. Your restructuring plan violates those covenants." Dad's face had gone red. "That's impossible. Archway Capital is a New York investment fund. You're a consultant in Indianapolis." "I'm the sole owner of Archway Capital," I said. "I have been for 8 years." "That's absurd," Christopher said, finding his voice. "Archway Capital manages over $2 billion in assets. You can't possibly." $2.3 billion as of last quarter, I corrected. "Across 47 investments in medical technology, pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and healthcare services. My team includes 12 investment managers, 6 analysts, and 4 attorneys. Our offices are in New York, Boston, and San Francisco." "This is insane," Victoria said. "You expect us to believe you own a multi-billion-dollar investment fund?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," I said, pulling out my phone. "James, send the verification documents to everyone in this room." Phones started buzzing around the table. People pulled them out, opened emails, began reading. I watched understanding dawn on their faces in stages. Confusion, disbelief, shock, horror. "These documents show Archway Capital owning significant positions in all of our companies," Uncle Thomas said slowly, looking up from his phone. "Is this real?" "Call your attorneys," I suggested. "Have them verify." "I'll wait." Uncle Thomas did exactly that, stepping away from the table with his phone pressed to his ear. Dad was scrolling through the documents, his face cycling through colors. Mom had gone very pale. Christopher was reading his phone like it might suddenly make sense if he stared hard enough. $220 million, Dad said finally. "You're telling me you own $220 million of my company's debt?" "Yes. And Christopher's preferred shares." Diana Chen's voice came through my phone speaker. I'd left the conference line connected. "Archway Capital owns 70% of the Series B preferred shares in Prescott Pharmaceutical Partners." "And Victoria," Margaret added, "we're a major investor in 3 gene therapy companies that directly compete with the treatment you're about to pitch to your family, which creates disclosure obligations under SEC regulations." Victoria sat down heavily. "You've been investing in my competitors?" "I've been investing in the most promising gene therapy companies," I corrected. "Your company is good, Victoria. But it's not the only good company in the space." Uncle Thomas returned to the table. "I just spoke with my attorney. He confirms that Archway Capital is indeed owned by Sarah Prescott. He also confirms that the investment positions outlined in these documents are accurate according to public filings and industry databases." $2.3 billion, Mom said faintly. "You manage $2.3 billion? "I manage a portfolio worth $2.3 billion, I clarified. "My personal net worth is different. But yes, roughly that scale." "How?" Christopher demanded. "How is this possible? You live in a rental apartment. You drive a piece of junk. You work as a consultant." "I live in a rental apartment because I travel constantly for work and don't want to maintain a house," I said. "I drive a reliable car that I've maintained well because I don't care about impressing people with a luxury vehicle. And yes, I do consulting work, evaluating companies for potential investment. It's excellent due diligence." 8 years, Dad said, his voice strained. You've been doing this for 8 years and never said anything? I tried, I said quietly. Do you remember Thanksgiving 7 years ago? I mentioned I'd started an investment fund. You laughed and asked if I was investing my birthday money. Christmas 6 years ago, I said I'd made some successful investments in medical technology. You patted my head and told me to be careful not to lose my shirt. The silence was absolute. I stopped trying after that, I continued. I stopped mentioning my work. I stopped correcting your assumptions. I watched you all discuss your successes at family dinners while dismissing my career as cute or quaint. I listened to you explain business concepts to me that I understood better than you did. And I kept investing in your companies because despite everything, you're my family and your businesses are actually good. You let us make fools of ourselves, Mom said, anger breaking through her shock. No, I corrected. You made fools of yourselves by assuming you knew everything about my life without asking a single question. This is vindictive, Dad said. Hiding your success, waiting for this moment. I didn't hide anything, I interrupted. I just stopped volunteering information to people who weren't interested in hearing it. Every investment I made was public record. Every filing was with the SEC. Archway Capital's portfolio is available to anyone who cares to look. You never looked because you assumed there was nothing to see. Victoria had her head in her hands. The gene therapy investment. You're going to tell everyone it's high risk. It is high risk, I said. 12% chance of success according to industry standards. That doesn't mean it's a bad investment. High risk can be appropriate for a diversified portfolio. But describing it as low risk to potential investors is securities fraud. I wasn't trying to, Victoria started. I know, I said more gently. I know you believe in the treatment, but belief doesn't change risk profiles. And asking family members to invest based on misleading information could destroy relationships and potentially lead to legal action. Christopher was still staring at his phone. The merger. The press release. You're saying I can't. You can't liquidate preferred shares without majority shareholder approval, I said. Which means you can't complete the merger as structured. I'm sorry, Christopher. I know you've been working on this for months, but the deal needs to be restructured. How long have you known? He asked, his voice tight. About the merger? 6 weeks. My team analyzed it thoroughly. It's not a bad deal, but the structure is wrong. If you'd asked me, if you'd known to ask me, I could have helped you fix it before you committed to terms. And my restructuring? Dad asked. You're going to block that too? I'm going to require approval as a note holder, yes, I said. Which I'm willing to give, but only after reviewing the terms carefully. The expansion plan is solid, Dad. Your company is positioned well. But taking on $180 million in senior debt at the proposed terms would put the company at significant risk of default. There are better ways to finance expansion. Better ways you'll dictate, Dad said bitterly. Better ways I'll suggest, I corrected. As the holder of $220 million in existing debt, I have a vested interest in your company's success. I want to help, Dad. I've always wanted to help. You just never wanted my help. Uncle Thomas had been quiet through all of this, reading through documents on his tablet. Now he looked up. Sarah, these filings show you made your first major investment 9 years ago. You were 25 years old. Where did you get the initial capital? Inheritance from Grandpa, I said. The $500,000 he left me when I graduated college. You all told me to invest it conservatively, maybe buy a condo. I invested it in a medical device startup that was looking for angel funding. The company was acquired 3 years later for $47 million. My stake was worth $8.2 million. Grandpa John's money, Mom said slowly. You turned $500,000 into $8 million? That was the first investment, I said. I've made 183 investments since then. 147 were successful, 29 broke even, 7 failed completely. The successful investments included 3 IPOs, 12 acquisitions, and ongoing positions in 47 companies. Total return over 9 years. Approximately 4,600%. The numbers hung in the air like smoke. You're telling me, Christopher said, his voice carefully controlled, that our failure of a sister is actually more successful than all of us combined? I'm not in competition with you, I said. I never was. I'm happy for your successes, proud of what you've built. I've invested in your companies because I believe in you, even when you didn't believe in me. But you let us block you from this meeting, Victoria said. You stood at that door and let us tell you that you weren't successful enough to participate. Yes. Why? I considered the question. Because I wanted to see if anyone would defend me. If anyone would say, wait, Sarah might have something valuable to contribute, let's at least hear her out. No one did. That's not fair, Mom protested. Why not? I asked. You've all known me for 34 years. You've watched me graduate magna cum laude from Northwestern. You've seen me build a consulting business. I've mentioned investments, mentioned success, mentioned work. At what point does it become reasonable to assume I might know what I'm talking about? No one had an answer. The question now, I said, is where we go from here. I'm the major investor in most of your companies. I have significant influence over your business decisions. But I don't want to be an adversary. I want to help. Help like you helped today? Dad asked. By humiliating us? I prevented 3 major financial disasters, I said. Your debt restructuring would have triggered a default that could have bankrupted Prescott Medical Devices. Christopher's merger would have collapsed in lawsuits and regulatory problems. Victoria's investment pitch would have exposed the family to securities fraud charges. That's not humiliation, Dad. That's protection. Protection we didn't ask for, he said. No, I agreed. Protection you didn't know you needed because you never asked what I knew or what I could do. Uncle Thomas cleared his throat. I think Sarah has earned a seat at this table. More than earned it. I move that we restructure this meeting to include her full participation, with the understanding that Archway Capital is a major stakeholder in family business decisions going forward. Seconded, Aunt Helen said quietly. She'd been silent through the entire revelation, but now she met my eyes with something that might have been respect. Sarah should have been included from the beginning. We were wrong to exclude her. So we just pretend the last 9 years didn't happen? Christopher asked. We just accept that our little sister is secretly a billionaire and move on? I'm not a billionaire, I said. My fund manages $2.3 billion, but my personal net worth is substantially less. Around $480 million, depending on current valuations. The room absorbed this information with varying expressions of shock. Around $480 million, Victoria repeated. You say it like it's nothing. It's not nothing, I said. But it's also not relevant to whether we can work together as a family. The question isn't how much money I have or how much money you have. The question is whether we can respect each other enough to have honest conversations about business and family and success. You want respect, Dad said slowly. After humiliating us today. I want what I've always wanted, I said. To be seen. To be heard. To be treated like someone whose opinion might have value. I don't need you to celebrate my success or apologize for underestimating me. I just need you to acknowledge that I exist as something other than the disappointing daughter who never lived up to her potential. Mom was crying now, silently, her carefully applied makeup beginning to streak. We got it so wrong, she said. All these years we got it so wrong about you. Yes, I said simply. You did. I don't know how to fix this, she said. Neither do I admitted. But maybe we start by having the meeting we should have had in the first place. The one where everyone gets to participate, where everyone's contributions are valued, where we work together instead of competing for who's most successful. You'd still participate? Christopher asked. After what we said to you? You're my family, I said. I'm angry, yes. I'm hurt. But I'm also pragmatic. I have $300 million invested across your various companies. If you all fail, I lose money. If you succeed, we all benefit. So yes, I'll participate. If you'll actually listen. Uncle Thomas stood. Then let's start over. Sarah, would you like to present Archway Capital's portfolio and discuss how our investments intersect? I pulled up my presentation on my tablet. The one I'd prepared 3 weeks ago. The one I'd thought I'd give today before my family blocked me from the room. I'd be happy to, I said. For the next 3 hours we worked through the family portfolio with new eyes. I explained the debt covenants on Dad's restructuring and offered alternative financing structures. I walked Christopher through the regulatory requirements for his merger and suggested ways to restructure the deal that protected all shareholders. I provided Victoria with detailed risk analysis on her gene therapy investment and connected her with researchers at competing companies who might be willing to collaborate rather than compete. It wasn't comfortable. There were moments of tension, flashes of anger, periods of uncomfortable silence. But we worked through it, all of us, like a family who'd finally decided to see each other clearly. By the end of the meeting, we'd restructured $400 million in investments, identified $60 million in new opportunities, and prevented 3 major disasters. We'd also scheduled a follow-up meeting for next month, this time with me leading the discussion on portfolio diversification and risk management. As we filed out of the private dining room, Victoria caught my arm. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for what I said at the door. For all the times I assumed I knew better than you." "I'm sorry too," I said, "for not trying harder to correct those assumptions." "No," she said firmly. "That's not your responsibility. We should have asked. We should have cared enough to ask." Christopher joined us in the hallway. "The consulting business with 32 employees. Is that real, or did you make that up to make us feel stupid?" "It's real," I said. "Prescott Analysis Group. We specialize in operational efficiency for mid-sized manufacturing and logistics companies. Annual revenue last year was $8.4 million. $8.4 million? He looked stunned. "That's not a small consulting practice." "No," I agreed. "But it's also not what I'm most proud of. The work is good, but it's not my passion. The investments are where I make my impact." "What is your passion?" he asked. I smiled. "Funding medical innovation that helps people. Finding treatments that work. Supporting researchers and companies that are trying to solve real problems. That's why I invested in all of your companies in the first place. You're all doing good work, even if you're also insufferable sometimes." He laughed, the sound surprised. "Fair assessment." Mom and Dad approached together, their earlier confidence replaced with uncertainty. "Sarah," Dad said, then stopped, seeming unsure how to continue. "We owe you an enormous apology," Mom finished. "Not just for today. 4 years of assumptions and dismissals and treating you like you were less than you are." "Yes," I said. "You do." "I don't know if we can fix this," Dad said. "I don't know if you can forgive us." "I don't know either," I said honestly. "But I know we can try. That's what families do, right? We mess up and we hurt each other and we try to do better." "We will do better," he said. "I promise you that." "Don't promise," I said. "Just do it. Show up. Ask questions. Listen to the answers. That's all I've ever wanted." Uncle Thomas had been waiting by the elevators. As I approached, he smiled. "Your grandfather would be very proud," he said. "He always said you had a head for business. We should have listened to him." "He was right about a lot of things," I said. "He was." "And Sarah, thank you for protecting us today. Even after how we treated you. That took character." "It took pragmatism," I corrected. "And maybe a little bit of stubbornness. I wasn't going to let you all destroy yourselves just because you underestimated me." He laughed. "Fair enough." I left the Sterling Hotel and walked to my 10-year-old Subaru, which started reliably like it always did. My phone showed messages from James, Diana, and Margaret, all confirming that the various disasters had been averted. Christopher's merger was being restructured. Dad's financing was being renegotiated. Victoria's investment pitch would be revised with proper risk disclosure. One message stood out from Dad. "Family dinner next Sunday? Your mother wants to hear about Archway Capital. Really hear about it this time. Will you come?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "I'll be there." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it was a start. And sometimes that's all you can ask for from family. I drove back to Indianapolis, back to my rental apartment with the view of the canal. Back to my simple life that was anything but simple. The life my family had finally, after all these years, decided to actually see. Whether they'd learn from this remained uncertain. But at least now they were looking. And that, I thought as the Chicago skyline disappeared in my rearview mirror, was progress.